and welcome to Conversations with Matt DeLockery. Most people may not realize it, but April is Autism Awareness Month. And here to share with us is Nick Peters. Nick is a Christian apologist living in Atlanta. He runs the apologetics ministry, Deeper Waters, with a blog at deeperwatersapologetics.com and a podcast called the Deeper Waters Podcast. He lives with his wife Allie and cat Shiro. Both Nick and Allie have Aspergers. When Nick is not reading or debating, he's usually playing video games, watching game shows, or some other favorite show from the past. So Nick, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Matt.
Now, primarily today we're going to talk about Asperger's, but I know autism and Asperger's are related. So could you tell us a little bit about autism and what it is, and then we'll move into Asperger's?
The spectrum is very, very wide, and one of the rules is when you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Don't think we're all alike. Although we do share many similarities, I like to think of Asperger's as autism light. A number of things that can be characteristic are very obsessive thinking patterns and such, inability to understand or follow social cues easily, hesitancy to things like small talk, problems with eye contact, tendencies to take things literally and such. And sometimes we can have very odd diets, things of that sort. Many on the spectrum have a hard time with abstract thinking and can usually be very intelligent individuals.
So Asperger's is like a higher functioning version of autism with maybe some disabilities, but also some positives?
That's what I would say. In fact, there's a lot of people that are saying that we're going to be getting rid of the word Asperger's and just going with autism and talking about high-functioning autism, but I still stick with Asperger's just because it's what I've used for so long and such. And yes, there are downsides, but I find I have a whole lot of positives with it. My wife and I very much disagree on this kind of thing. If there was a cure announced tomorrow for our condition, she would take it immediately. And I think that could be very good for her. I would say keep that thing far away from me. I have no interest whatsoever.
Okay, so you wouldn't take a cure for Asperger's if you had it.
Right.
Because there's a lot of positives. Could you describe what some of those are? Like, what is it?
I think one of the positives is that my mind is able to work on multiple levels at once. Sometime after we got married, I'd go visit my in-laws, and they'd be talking to me. I'd be playing like my 3DS or a PSP at the same time. Think, oh, this guy is rude. He's not really listening to us. Until they realized I was remembering everything they were saying and able to keep part of the conversation. I'm able to multitask that way, and I think it does give me a heightened intelligence, as it were, an ability to really get caught up in a subject. That's one of my benefits in Christian apologetics. I can just go crazy reading books on a topic very easily.
So do you have like an ability to remember things better than normal people, or is it an ability to focus better, or what makes you unique compared to other people who are not on the spectrum?
It could be a little bit of both. For instance, when the series Smallville was out, I was majorly into the series. And every single title of every episode, except for the two-parter Absolute Justice, was a one-word title. There are over 200 episodes. I have them all memorized in order by title.
Is that something that you had to work on, or is it just happened?
It just happened, really. I mean, I'd go to the Krypton site every day, and I'd see new information coming up, new spoilers, look at old episodes, and after a while, it just happened. I started remembering these things, and every now and then I'd go back through it once I realized I was doing this and have some fun and memorize all of them. And today I can still know many of the titles incredibly well. It's a series that stuck with me.
Is it something that like I don't know, like certain things sort of trigger, or do you sort of remember everything? Like in 5 years from now, are you going to remember this conversation that we're having now?
I wish I had that kind of memory. No, it really has to be something I'm really focused and obsessed on with and such. If I went and played, say, the original Legend of Zelda today on my DS, which I've done recently, I could still very easily find everything again. Because I just know these things. I can't explain how it works. I just do.
So you have powers of recall that are beyond what normal people have for things that you're very focused in on. But you said if you've met one person with Asperger's, you've met one person with Asperger's, so everybody's different.
Yeah.
Your wife, is she similar to you? Different?
Oh, very, very different. In fact, she has short-term memory problems, and I mean that's something we're working on. I found that she's become much more rational, logical since we married, and I've managed to become more emotional because we kind of help change each other. She's the artist. She did not get the intellectual side. Although I'd say she did get it when it comes to animals. She knows animals very, very well, but everything else, no.
So sort of like it sounds like what you're saying is that one of the things that's very similar is that people with Asperger's tend to focus in on a particular thing a lot
Mm-hmm.
and have a higher than normal knowledge or awareness or depth in that area,
Mm.
but maybe not so much in other areas. Is that fair?
Right, right. It's usually such as we have a complete obsessive interest or not at all. I mean, my wife's been seeing me turn on the TV lately, and I'll turn on Monk, which was one of my favorite shows also for a while. She says, "You have a series on DVD. You've seen every episode. Why are you wanting to watch it again?" Why not? And for me, if I share a joke, it's just as funny the 271st time as it was the first.
So it never gets old.
Nope.
So how is life different for someone with Asperger's?
It's mainly in the social cues. I'd say we don't really understand them and we don't gather hints very well. I can even catch on when Ari's hinting me something many times.
Well, that's not different than most husbands and wives. We can't pick things up.
That's true, but it's very extreme, I think, in many of our cases and such. And small talk is something that really makes no sense to us. I mean, if you communicate with me, it doesn't need about general things. Don't ask me how I'm doing, things like that and such. That doesn't register to me because I can't give an exact enough answer. I say when I talk about subject matter. And that's pretty much it. When I've conveyed all the information I wish to convey, then that's it. I'm done.
So, how many people would you say have Asperger's? I mean, is it something that a lot of people have because, or maybe in a mild form? Because some of what you're describing, like the not very good with social cues and very focused on certain topics and not really getting small talk and stuff like that. I know a lot of people who are like that. Do they have Asperger's, or is that just
That's
normal?
not my call to make if they do or not. Anyone who thinks they could, you need to go see a professional psychologist and have yourself tested and such. But I think there are many of us can have many traits of it. Just like you don't have to have OCD to have some obsessive qualities. Like some of us can still be strong hand watchers even if we don't have OCD. But I think there's more people than we realize, and it is going much more mainstreamy. My wife and I love to watch The Good Doctor, for instance, and we're very happy to see shows coming out exploring what it's like to be on the spectrum.
I'm not familiar with that show. Is that one about life on the spectrum?
Yes, it's about a surgeon who works at a hospital, and he has autism. And it's wonderful to see the way he interacts with people. And when he's trying to diagnose a patient, you see what's going on in his mind where he's picturing everything taking place before he does what he does.
So if you're hyper focused on the things that you're involved in, I imagine that would make people with Asperger's at least possibly more skilled at certain things if it's what they're focused on. Is that true?
Yeah, but if it's something we're not focused on, it's very difficult. If we go to a social setting, such as, say, my wife and I are both in Celebrate Recovery, and we also go to small group at our church. In both of those settings, Allie is able to be much more social than I am. I usually just bring my book and I keep to myself a lot. And when there's something else going on, I honestly have my Kindle Fire open and I'm doing something on there just to keep myself occupied, because otherwise it's hard to really focus on what's being said. I still hear everything that's being said, but I have to keep my mind going.
So you can't just like let it turn off, or you can't intentionally focus it on something that isn't, one of your fixations. Is that
Right, I need to really be engaged. And even still, I mean, heck, if I'm playing a game, just this morning I was playing some on PS4 and said to my tap, hey, turn on this station on the radio and let me hear some talk radio at the same time.
so? What's it like interacting with people who are on the spectrum and um, who don't necessarily know much about Asperger's? Do we act weird? Do Are we insensitive? Like what? How would you characterize us?
I'd say many things I see people doing, they really don't make a lot of sense to me. And such, we refer to it often as neurotypical behavior and things of that sort. And I mean, that's just how it is. For me, I guess what I just say is that it depends on the person. And sometimes people have a hard time getting used to us. Sometimes people think I'm cold and insensitive, and sometimes I am, but then also sometimes I tend to have my own way of playing with people as well. Like I said, jokes never get old with me, and I'm extremely good at doing deadpan, where I can show no emotional reaction whatsoever to something and act thoroughly confused. And there's been a number of times someone from a meeting has gone up to my wife and said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend your husband. Is he okay? And she's sitting there thinking, oh gosh, what did he do now?
So, are you a good poker player or a bad poker player?
I would be a good one because I show no reaction whatsoever. If I'm planning a surprise party for my wife, which I have done before, I can look her straight in the face and say, no, honey, I'm not planning anything, and be entirely convinced. Now, sometimes I'm not able to do this with her as well, but if I'm really intent on wanting to surprise her or something, which I love to do, then yeah, I can do it.
So you don't show any emotions, or you can make sure that you don't. Can you read emotions?
That can be very difficult as well. It's very hard to tell what someone is feeling. Being able to empathize with others is a great weakness of mine. I speak sarcasm very, very fluently. Reading it is not the exact same thing. I can have a very hard time telling if someone's being sarcastic or not.
Does Allie pick up on your sarcasm?
Many times she does, but she's gotten used to me, and she kind of expects my playful sarcasm. She doesn't like it when I do any other kind, which it is something I have to work on, because we are sinners, and sometimes, as much as I try to be a devoted husband, I make mistakes.
Okay, so you do Christian ministry and Christian apologetics. Could you talk a little bit about that and about how having Asperger's helps, doesn't help, or so forth with that?
Well, a lot of what I do on the internet, and that is very, very much easier for me. I know the things I need to say if I'm talking with someone in person, but I don't know how to often fit them into the conversation. Often a bit awkward for me. I mean, if we were part of church together and we were doing door-to-door evangelism, that would terrify me. Now, if I had someone come with me who could get the conversation started, and then I could jump in, okay, I could probably handle that. I like what Hugh Ross has said, who is also on the spectrum, by the way. He has said, I would rather talk to 100 people than to one. I agree.
That makes sense. What are some of your apologetic interests? Do you focus a lot on a particular one or two topics?
I have a few topics I'm interested in. The resurrection of Jesus is a big one for me, and that especially looking at it from an honor shame perspective. And when I found out that that's the culture of the Bible, that really changed things because I think that's the way I think I normally already think, and it just makes so much sense to me. A secondary issue in Christianity that interests me is eschatology. I've considered, if I get a webcam someday and such, making videos to address people on YouTube who keep making predictions about when the rapture is going to take place and such, which I consider a great embarrassment to Christianity. And ever since being married, marriage and family issues are extremely important to me. Things like waiting until marriage and honoring that covenant are extremely important. I try and read books on marriage regularly to learn how to be a better husband.
So, what are things that people who are not on the spectrum should know about people who have Asperger's? If we find ourselves meeting you or somebody else, what should we know? How should we act? What should we do differently or not differently?
Don't try and force your way into our world, as it were. Give it time. It takes a while, often, unless you can show some shared interest with us that we can gravitate towards immediately. It will take time. Usually, if you come forward and you're very exuberant with us and very much wanting to be a friend, you won't really succeed in making friends with us. You'll more succeed in terrifying us. And yeah, I do find such things frightening. Physical touch can often be very difficult for us. We don't really like having people touch us. And for me, I have a back condition as well. So if someone comes and gives me a pat on the back, it's doubly intrusive. The only person whose touch I really care for is my wife's, and that's it. Try to avoid just small talk and such with us. We don't know what to say for sure, and it keeps making us nervous. I mean, if you've ever seen The Big Bang Theory and Sheldon Cooper, words like social protocol make a whole lot of sense to us. Ask, what's the social protocol to follow here? I remember when I lived in Charlotte, my roommate and I had Jehovah's Witnesses visiting us, and he's big into apologetics too. And we went to their Kingdom Hall once, and afterwards, when we were leaving, we were love bombed, as it were. People coming up to us, all wanting to get to know us and such. And some lady came up and took my hand and was shaking it and said, "Hi, I'm so and so." And I was staring at her, blank-faced and such. I knew exactly what I needed to do, but my mind could not make the connection. And my roommate, he just said to me, "Say your name." I needed him to say that. Otherwise, I could have been just stuck there because all these people around me, it was giving me so much to process, and I couldn't handle it. It was kind of a sensory overload.
So it sounds like, you're basically just having to process everything that you do instead of,
Mm-hmm.
I guess with social
Yeah.
cues, most people just sort of act and don't really have to
Yeah.
think about what they do.
Yeah. Processing is a big thing. We're examining everything, which, again, that's a benefit with apologetics because I can examine an argument very, very well and catch on to things as well. If I'm even driving down the road and I see a billboard and such of a message, I can start really thinking about it and saying, what is that person saying? Is that really a convincing line to get me to buy something, and things of that sort?
Because you're used to processing things all the time, because that's
Right.
what you do.
Mm-hmm.
That makes perfect sense. It's sort of like, I think, when you were talking earlier about your abilities and skills and interests and things, it sounds like whereas most people are sort of spread out, like we have a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there,
Mm-hmm.
yours is like, it's not like you have more or less, it's just like they're all piled up in one corner.
Yeah, more hyper-focused. as well and such.
And very analytical and
Yep.
process everything.
Yeah, my own mother has said once, I wish you would call me more often, just to talk and such. And that doesn't make sense to me. Why call just to talk? I call if there's something to say, and if there is, where I can call regularly. Like, we both go through the novels of Mary Higgins Clark together, and usually I'm the first one to get them at the local library and go through, and we just have this happen, and she got it after me, and I would call her regularly. And for me, it wasn't just to check on her, but it was kind of a bit of play for taunting. It's like, well, Mom, I hope I'm not keeping you away from doing anything important right now. I hope there's nothing you're really wondering about, no mystery that you're trying to solve right now, which, by the way, I know the answer to it, too.
So you mentioned Sheldon Cooper on The Big Bang Theory.
Right.
I know people have said in the past that maybe he had Asperger's, and I thought I heard something about the show's creators maybe saying that he did. Do you know anything about that? Is he a good example
Actually,
of someone with Asperger's?
It's my understanding the show's creators have said he doesn't have Asperger's, but Allie and I watched it and we think, yeah, boy, he absolutely has it. In fact, when I interviewed Hugh Ross on this kind of topic, I asked him if he was a mirror, and he said, people ask me about that show all the time, and they say to us, are you really as nerdy as the people on that show are? And he said, no. They actually had to tone it down a lot because we're even nerdier than that.
So it's basically like Sheldon Cooper, but ramped up a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like Sheldon, we've got our obsessions and things like such when we can tend to drive people crazy around us. For me, sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. And I can say, for instance, if I think I've violated someone's social protocol, it really does wear away at me, especially if I feel like they're scolding me for something and such, for doing something wrong, because, in all honesty, that's not my intention. I mean, I'm willing to play with you and tease you and things like that, but there's no sincere desire to really hurt you, provided you're a friend of mine. If you're on the other side, like, for instance, if there's the unwritten rule on Facebook, if you can dialogue with my wife, you can argue with her, you can disagree with her, but if you hurt her, stay back. I will show up. And yes, I will be wanting to hurt you very badly.
So what else can you tell us about Asperger's that we haven't really covered so far?
Diet can be a big one. When I was growing up, my diet was very restricted. In fact, even when I lived with a roommate in Charlotte when I was in seminary, I'd normally go to the store and buy like a Tombstone pizza. Then I'd break it up in quarters, and I'd have a quarter for dinner every night. And I'd buy 3 or 4 of them and have them in the freezer for a while. Every night that was going on. Where, after being married, that's no longer the case. The only time we have pizza in the freezer really is when we go to the store and buy one. Allie is the person who changed my diet, and she did not even really have to try to do it. It was just her being her.
So when we get to meet people who have Asperger's, we should understand that there's going to be some things different. Diet we may or may not see.
Yeah.
Picking up on social cues is going to be something that you're probably not going to get very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it sounds like the key to really being able to interact with somebody who has Asperger's is understanding, okay, social cues are not going to be there. So if they say something wrong or they're just not, having the back and forth, especially if we're doing small talk, then that's normal.
Yeah.
Just don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And maybe try to focus on a topic or a particular interest or something that you can think about, something that will allow your brain to analyze and process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you find out what we're interested in and you get interested in it too, that will go a long way. I mean, I have another friend here in the Atlanta area who also has Asperger's, and we can talk together great because we share many of the same interests. I mean, back in 2017 when the new Power Rangers movie came out, we were there on day 1 together. And when we get together, it's never we're going to watch an episode sometime together, because it's just the kind of thing we do together, and that fits into our obsessions.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing with us. Before we end the interview and before you go, could you tell us a little bit more about your ministry and how people can get involved?
Yeah, Deeper Waters is what I do, which my wife says it's a very funny name because really I'm terrified of water. But yeah, that's one area all my logic goes right out the window. Put me in a swimming pool, there is no logic left in me. But the name is just because I refer to Christianity as kind of like an ocean, and I've seen many people just sitting in the shallow end, not doing anything. I think, hey, there's a whole lot deeper you can be doing and such. So I've been doing the blog ever since 2007. I think it was 2013 I started the podcast, and that's been going very strong. It's a 5-star podcast on iTunes, and I usually interview a guest for 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon. So it's one of the most in-depth interviews. And if you look at my list of guests I've had on my show, these aren't second-rate people. This is the top of the top, the cream of the crop. I mean, I get the very best on there. And when it comes to the research and such behind it, I do it all. I have a sound guy who graciously came into my life and volunteered to help me with sound preferences and such, which I don't know how to do, which has been a huge blessing to me. But my work can be found at deeperwatersapologetics.com. I have some ebooks on Amazon that people can purchase. I have a jewelry store that you can use to buy things, and 25% of the proceeds go to Deeper Waters. And if someone wants to donate to us, where when you click the donate link, it takes you to Risen Jesus. That's the ministry of my in-laws, Mike and Debbie Lacona. I know you're familiar with them. And you just make your donation there, but then you get in touch with me or Allie or Mike or Debbie, and you say, hey, I made this, but I want to go to Nick Peters. I want to go to Deeper Waters. And I'd be happy to speak at any event about Christian apologetics or about autism, Asperger's, what life is like on the spectrum. If you want my wife to come, I'm sure we could come together as a couple without any problem whatsoever. But our ministry is just one focused on giving good apologetics and discipleship and awakening the world to life in the autism community.
Well, very cool. I will put a link to that information in the description of this episode and on my website, mattdelacroix.com. So if you're interested in learning more about apologetics, check out Deeper Waters. And also make sure to subscribe to this podcast if you want to hear more interesting content like this. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Nick, for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.